member happened to be present when their wife had a massive heart attack and was able to save her life because he was home. He Craig wants us to share the story because he believes if it wasn't for that holiday being added to this last contract, that his wife would not have been able to dial 911. His wife would not have been able to get to emergency care, get some emergency care. And something as simple as us adding a holiday to a group of workers so that they could be home with their family literally led to saving someone's life. Now, I've always believed that this happens 100,000 times over. We just usually don't hear about the stories or know about it. But for a member, Craig, thank you very much. Number one, I know you listen to the show regularly, and thank you for sharing that with us. And also thank you for recognizing that this is the beautiful process of this job, and this is the beautiful process of collective bargaining, and that adding something like that would then lead to what is obviously a difficult situation that happened, but having a positive outcome as a result of being able to be home with your spouse and be able to care for the situation. So big shout out to you. Thank you for sharing that. Atreus, thank you for letting me know. Actually, yesterday, Atreus texted me and said, hey, I got the story I got to share with you. Man, it's a really big deal. And obviously when I talked to him, I was like, oh my goodness, this is perfect. This is exactly why we do what we do. And it's exactly why it's important to understand the importance of unions because having a member recognize that collectively bargaining a holiday ultimately led to a positive outcome of, an immense level. So again, shout out to them. And so real quick, let's go back to a recap from last week. Sorry for kind of droning in on about that, but I just think it's such an important story for us not to take advantage of these or take for granted these little things that mean a lot. So thank you for sharing, Atreus, and thank you for definitely letting us share this, Craig, and your family and you're in our hearts and our minds and our prayers and our thoughts for a speedy recovery, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you out. Last week's show, we had a great show. We had Karen Jones on, the historian from the IBT in Washington, D.C. Man, I got so many text messages and emails and comments where people say my favorite show ever, and hearing the stories of how the great, what I call one of the greatest moments in labor history, which is July 20th of 1934, where workers in Minnesota basically shut the city down and said, we've had enough. Went on one of what's considered one of the greatest strikes in the history of our country that ultimately led to multiple, many other labor disputes throughout the country that brought an end to essentially workers dying on the job, workers being put in very difficult situations. Karen did a very beautiful job, an amazing job of spelling out like the history leading up to it, the hard work of the individuals at the center of it, really talking about the women's groups in which came together to build solidarity within the community and hold each other's families accountable and get involved with a dispute that really became community-wide. Karen, if you're listening, always a pleasure to have you on. As a matter of fact, most people had told me that they thought that we could do an hour with her. We could probably do 3 hours with Karen. She's amazing, and what we'll do is we'll bring her on more and have her talk about other significant points in history, and maybe we'll do some a bit longer shows with her because that time that we had with her just blew by extremely fast. We also had Dr. G on from Ava Dental. He's been a longtime partner, did a great job of sharing his history, and we appreciate him coming on. And ironically, we got a dentist here today too. He's going to talk to us about his partnership here in San Bernardino, or over in San Bernardino. And as far as a future show is concerned, I'm really excited to have Randy Kamek on here in the near future. We're going to have him on at a future show here pretty soon. The last couple times I've tried to squeeze him in, he's had a couple commitments that's not been able to get him on. But looking forward to you, Randy. Hopefully you're listening in, and you recognize how much we all appreciate the amount of energy you've put into the labor movement over the last literally 50 years. And so now it's a part of the show where we get into live shout-outs. This list is getting longer and longer each week. That's a good sign. That tells us more and more people are listening live. So we have Sonia Jackson and the SDP group from ARMC, Teresa Preciado and Jason Nugent listening live. They're actually part of those. They're on our NEO team, and obviously all of you know Teresa. It's one of our most listened to shows to this point. David Mitchell from the Fontana Family Health Clinic. Barstow, shout out to Barstow. We have a number of members listening live there. Obviously I talked about Craig and his family just a minute ago. City of Montclair members and their bargaining committee, Alex Perez and Laura Rico. Kurt Garrison, always listening in. Kurt, love you. Great job. He actually sent me a really good email the other day. Really appreciate the input on the whole O'Brien, RNC discussion. Definitely agree with a lot of things you put in there, Kirk. And really appreciate you making sure you're reaching out to us. And obviously appreciate you listening in live. Adrian Chavez from Code Enforcement, the City of Needles. Yes, even all the way out in Needles, they're listening to us. Rebel, Palm Desert is listening in live. Jenny Hernandez from Public Health is listening in live. Tad, the City of Rialto, is listening live. It sounds like we have a lot of people in that department itself. And the City of Chino members and Jesse Pinato is listening in live. So that takes us to the next part of our show, which is our Teamster jobs. And I think it's important for us to, I got to find my Teamster jobs. What did I do with them? I set them somewhere here. Oh, there they are. So we're going to do something fun this week on the Teamster jobs. The City of Fontana is currently in negotiations, literally in negotiations right now with our staff member, Carlos Gonzalez. They're bargaining right now. So we're going to do a shout out on 3 of their jobs individually on what happens, what Teamsters do in the City of Fontana. One of them is administrative clerks, customer service, data entry, general office work. So if you come into the City of Fontana, it's very likely that the person that you're meeting at the front desk or the information desk or somewhere where they're going to point you in the right direction because you need something in the city, it's most likely a Teamster that you are interfacing with. And here's a fun one. I always love this one. The traffic signal maintenance technician. So whenever those traffic signals, you don't like that they're turning too fast or they're turning too slow or whatever it is, I guess you could cuss out a Teamster. It's a Teamster's fault because the techs actually deal with making sure those traffic signals are operating. Now, if you live in Fontana or a big city, think about how many traffic signals there are. I mean, there's a ton. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So it's a pretty tough job. It's a very difficult job in a sense of, just trying to manage all the different things. And then obviously the technology behind it, making sure that they're operating correctly. They maintain, repair, and install traffic signals around the city. So next time you see a traffic signal in the City of Fontana, just remember, a Teamster's taking care of you. And hopefully you get a green light more than you get a red light. If you get anything other than that, I really don't know what to say. The next one is the city project coordinators and specialists. They plan, schedule, and budget city projects such as infrastructure, roads, new parks, storm drains, and public building renovations. So think about it. When a new park is going to be opening up or they're putting a new park together, it's a Teamster that's coordinating and making sure that all of the resources are there, that it's laid out properly, that it's put together properly, and that it's going to be safe for the community to utilize that park. So think of Teamster. Clearly, don't forget, we've got this big Think of Teamster message going on and the narrative going on throughout the Inland Empire. You see our buses and our billboards. You obviously hear it on the radio show. Make sure you're on the lookout. Teamster Tuesday billboards. What we're going to do on Tuesdays is we're going to be highlighting a Teamster and a member and some work that they do on the billboards that we have throughout the Inland Empire. And we'll be doing that on Teamster Tuesday. So make sure you pay attention to those billboards on, even if you got to slow down when you know what one of our billboards, you got to slow down and wait for it to cycle through so that our billboard goes up. So the next part of the show is the news. We've got a lot of news to report on. Let's do some internal news first, which is the Teamster news, and that is Teamsters Local 399 in Hollywood has there's a tentative deal that's going to be out for vote for the members to ratify. Looks like they've got a really good deal there in Hollywood that mirrors a lot of what happened with the settlement on the very lengthy strike. And I think the most important thing that happens with this tentative deal is that it averts another labor dispute in Hollywood, which probably couldn't handle if they were without work again for a very long time. Those workers in the entire industry all sacrificed together to draw a line in the sand and say, these huge corporations, enough's enough. You got to really share the wealth. And think about it. They were out of work for months and months and months. Great job, 399, Lindsay, the entire team over there, everybody in that division. The next thing I want to report on in the news is Apple reaches its first ever retail union contract deal in the U.S. And so you have Apple Inc. Has reached a tentative collective bargaining agreement with the retail employees in Maryland and the IAM, which is the Machinists Union. So the membership will be voting on August 6th. This deal includes a very large salary increase, and it looks like they've been able to get a lot of those things ironed out. This is a big deal. It's the first time Apple on the retail side has agreed to a collective bargaining agreement. And so this is really good momentum for workers across the country. Let's keep it up. There's also the issue of the support for unions, especially among young workers, is growing very rapidly. And it's at the highest peak that it's been since our highest level of unionization in the country, which is in the 1950s. And it's great to see that workers somewhere between the 65 and 75% range being supportive of unions. And that depends on which age, demographic. There's a lot of variables that come into those different statistics. You put them all in a pot together, and there's an argument between it being 68% and 72%. But the reality is a large majority of workers in America want to be in a union. Now, obviously, only 10% is, and that is because the system and the rules that they've been made to be very cumbersome to become union, and corporations clearly fight it very, very hard. And there's an entire industry dedicated to union busting and try to prevent workers from organizing. And so let's get more workers to organize. And the name of our show is the Worker Power Hour. And the reason why this connects to the story is worker power is what drives workers to be able to have a union. And so the more workers that come together and exercise their worker power puts them in a position that they can collectively bargain with their employer, and that number will rise as time goes on. So great shout out to, obviously that generation that's moving in that direction. And the last thing I want to point out to the news is Disney did ratify. A vote was out for contract and has ultimately been ratified. I think the 2 shows ago, matter of fact, last time you were here before the show shut down on us, we actually had a bus going down to Disneyland, and that has turned out to be not only a tentative deal that's gone out, but it looks like it's ratified as well. And we congratulations to all those workers at Disneyland. This is the Worker Power Hour with Randy Corrigan, KCAA 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. And don't forget, we got radio show at teamsters1932.org if you want to email us any comments, ideas, and stuff. Maybe you like what I said. Maybe you think we should get a specific guest on the show. Maybe you want to. Maybe you can find someone that wants to argue with me on some of these subjects. So looking forward to that. That would be absolutely fun for me to participate in. With that, I'm going to transition into my favorite part of the show, which is the Teamster Advantage Partner. And our Teamster Advantage network is comprised of more than 1,000 small businesses throughout the Inland Empire and Los Angeles, mostly in the Inland Empire. And what we have done is built a relationship with more than 20 chambers of commerce, and we are just being present with small business, recognizing that they need as much help as possible. Much like workers in America, they're just struggling every day to pay their bills, take care of their family, work really hard, and these big corporations sometimes just have way too much control, and it's really hard to compete. And what our Teamster Advantage program does is it props up these small businesses in these communities and gives them access to our more than 30,000 members between Teamsters Local 1932 and Local 63, and allows, we encourage our members to engage with these small businesses, number one, and number two, it it brings an awareness of how important small businesses are to a local community. And so I have a guest here who is a dentist here in San Bernardino and is a new Teamster Advantage partner, correct?
Correct.
So why don't you introduce yourself and let's talk about your local business, and I'll ask you some questions from there.
Yeah, so thank you guys for just having me here on the show. I really appreciate everything. My name is Philip Tagatek. I'm a general dentist here in San Bernardino. Started off the practice here back February 2023, actually with Dr. G at Ava Dental. And it was because of Dr. G and Ava Dental that showed me what the unions were like. My first patients were all unions, all union members actually. We had late hours and we had Saturday and Friday appointments. So just trying to help everyone out. You know, a lot of these union workers worked late hours, so after 5 o'clock appointments, that was something that just brought business in, and having those Friday and Saturday appointments really helped us out. So, yeah, and then all of a sudden, I just wanted to see what it was like, you know, running a small business. And again, I just say thank you to Dr. G and Ava for just giving me that big break, to giving me that confidence to say, you know what, let's see what we can do. And so we continue to help out with. We still see the same patients. I offered the patients to go out to Ava Dental, but it's been great, you know, just coming here to San Bernardino.
Why San Bernardino?
Yeah.
Well, everybody's running from San Bernardino. We're obviously asking people not to, because we think it's a great community and there's a lot of positive that can be offered here. What drives you to be in San Bernardino and to have a thriving business here?
Yeah, so thriving, we're working on that right now. We're getting by.
Gotcha.
We're a startup.
Just starting up, yeah.
Yeah, as far as San Bernardino goes, back in dental school, I went to school in Pomona, Western University, and there was a free clinic, Riverside Free Clinic out here, and I was like, wow, as a dental student, I can go out here and provide services and help people out. And so stuck around with them, really liked it, and then graduated. I was like, oh man, I have to leave this
now
clinic.
What am I going to do?
Be there.
Right.
And little by little, you know, there's just opportunity out here in San Bernardino. I always knew I wanted to own a practice. I just didn't know where, when, or how to buy a practice. Most general dentists, when they buy a practice, they buy it 3 to 7 years after they graduate. I bought the practice around less than a year after graduating, and it was all the way out in San Bernardino. So I saw an opportunity to, one, own a practice, but number two, be able to help a community that really needs a dentist. A lot of people, like you said, run away from San Bernardino. And as I've started to get involved with the community here, being part of the Chamber of Commerce, being part of the Rotary Club, I can see that San Bernardino has a lot of potential. I mean, it was an all-America city just, less than a decade, no, 50 years
1977.
ago. 1977,
Yep.
about 50 years ago. And, you know, sure, I'm out here doing business, but if I'm here doing business, I might as well try to make this community better. What impact can I do? And it starts with affecting everyone around here. And so starting with the Teamsters, starting with my local neighbors at work, how can I help benefit this community? And so, you know, funny enough, with the Chamber of Commerce, I just got to say thank you to them. You know, I reached out to them saying, hey, I'm new here. How can you guys help me out? And how can I help you guys out? And they helped do a grand opening, the first grand opening that they've done since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been 3-4 years, but that's really what got me started with really getting involved with the community here and really showing me, like, there's a lot of people back here supporting this city, supporting this county.
We want it to succeed.
Yeah, they want it to succeed.
Yes.
It's just a lot of people want to run away. And for me, if my foot's on the ground here, I'm going to do everything I can to help benefit this community, see if we can get this community on the right track. And having, you know, meeting you here, and I think Mark definitely helped me out, just get this.
Yeah, Mark's busy over there talking right now. He's
busy.
jabbering and distracting us.
Yeah, but Mark was the one that, you know, just reached out and said, hey, how'd you like to be a local Teamsters Advantage? One of my patients actually reached out saying, hey, I know a guy, he can probably help you out. And from there, it's history. So here I am.
Awesome. So what's the discount that we have worked out for our members that participate in that go to you as a dentist? Because you do
Yeah.
two things. Not only are you Teams for Advantage, but you also do some free stuff for the community too.
Yeah, so right now for the community, we're doing about a 10% discount. Right now, I'm actually working with Mark to get into network with all the Teamsters PPOs and looking into the HMOs. I'm not too familiar with the HMOs and dental insurances, but for all the Teamsters members who show up with their little card, they get a nice little 10% discount over not the entire treatment, but their patient portion out of pocket. And of course, we'll always take care of them with emergency calls. If they come in, we'll squeeze every patient in to make sure that they're all taken care of.
Yeah, and that's, it seems like dentistry really a lot of times falls into only dealing with it during an emergency because nobody, and I'm guilty of this, guilty as charged. I am terrible about going to the dentist. Now, my wife, on the other hand, she is really good about going to the dentist, and she gives me, she gives me a ration all the time saying, come here, go to the dentist. What's wrong with you? Da, da, da. I'm like the average person, right? That we're terrible about going to the dentist.
Yeah.
Why are we so bad? Why are we so bad with this?
So it's funny you mentioned that. So a lot of times I get patients who only come in when they're in pain.
Right.
And, it's like, oh, man, if we caught this 6 months ago,
you'd be
it's just
fine.
a
It'd be
small
easy.
thing. It'd be easy. But now we're looking at a root canal. Now we're looking at extraction and an implant.
Oh, somebody I work with just went through this. Like they kicked it off, kicked it off, and it turned into a disaster. In the hospital for a couple days.
Oh, wow.
That's how bad the infection in them. And you're listening live right now, by the way, and you know exactly who I'm talking about.
Well, they didn't come to me, so I don't
No, what they did is they didn't go. They just didn't go.
They never went to the
Yeah, and they put it off, and then when they went in, finally, the dentist was like, "Yeah, you need to go to the emergency room.
Wow.
Like I'm going to do what I can, but you got to get to the emergency room right away." And they actually put him in for a couple days, and Anyway, so don't put it off.
No, don't put off dentistry. I always tell patients, I feel like the used car sale or the tire salesman is like, hey, your tires are wearing out. You should probably look into, taking care of that filling. Last thing I want for my patients is that they're out on vacation, they're out at a party, and then suddenly that tooth cracks and fractures, and now there's a massive abscess. It's like, hey, we caught this 6 months ago, but you waited so long, and now you're in pain. So a lot of my practice...
You're making me want to schedule my appointment.
A lot of my practice here, and if you read the Google reviews, it's all about patient education. I always tell patients, my job as your dentist isn't to tell you what you need. That's part of it. But my job as your dentist is to educate you. I want all my patients knowing, what are they getting themselves into? How did they end up in that situation? And how do we prevent going even further into a problem? I always tell patients, like, this is my job as your dentist.
That's awesome.
And I don't care if you go to Dr. Joe or Dr. Sam.
Do you have
down
any
the
funny
street.
stories?
Funny stories. Oh, man. Too many
Do you
to
ever
tell.
pull out the wrong tooth? Maybe you won't admit that here. I'm just
No,
kidding.
in dental school, they always tell you, like, be careful about pulling the wrong tooth. And
Yes.
so, as stupid as it is, where, you might have a completely broken tooth, I will take a mirror and I will give it to you and I'll say, all right, Mr. Corrigan, can you point to me the tooth I'm taking out? Even if we know
That's a
what tooth
backup.
it is, it's broken, it's abscess, it's a root tip. There's like, nope, that's
It's
it right
that
there.
one right
It's that one right there. Like I
All
said,
right,
I just
that's
want
a
to
good
make
cover.
sure all my patients
That's a good
know what's
CYA.
going on.
There you go.
I often get a lot of patients always say, Doc, you look a little young to be a dentist over here. Are you sure you know what you're doing? As I'm numbing them, it's like, no, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing.
Right.
You know.
Here's what's funny. I was young when I got into the labor movement.
Mm-hmm.
I was 21, 22. And being that age, I faced a lot of criticism or people not taking me serious because of that youth. So for me, whenever I hear that story of somebody being young in a certain profession, I always go, no, I can feel your pain.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of
as you got a needle in your hand. Yeah, I'm good.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing. Got my license, But granted to them, I did graduate fairly young. I think I was 26 when I graduated dental school. and
You
now
do
I'm
look like you're 22 or 23. And that's not a shot. That's I look like I'm 70. So I'd rather be on the side where you look young.
Yeah, but been practicing for several years now, so just it's been a good time. After patients hear me out with the treatment plan and just listening to them. I think a lot of dentists out here, or I think oftentimes, people just get overworked. They just hear what they need to hear and they just sign the paper of, oh, this is how much I owe. But I always try to tell patients, like, this is option one. This is what I would do if you were my mom or dad. This is what I would do for a friend. And then the last treatment option is what I would do for an ex. Of course, I'd take care of you. But,
This is great.
this is something that is not ideal, but it will get you by, And I always give patient autonomy is number one in the practice. I want you to make
But
sure.
you have tears for them.
There's tears
An
for
ex
them.
has got a tear. I love this
Ex has
guy.
got a tear. You got to love them, right? Still.
All right, we're going to wrap up this side of the hour. Anything you want to close on? We really appreciate you coming on. We appreciate the relationship and the future partnership. Obviously, you being new to the Teamster Advantage Network, you're going to find all the benefits that come with this free service, right? And just integrate in the system with one another. We really enjoy being part of the small business community and helping small business thrive in what we consider the most working class area in America. The Inland Empire is a very working class area, and we really appreciate you coming on the show. Anything you want to close with?
Yeah, closing off, just, again, thank you for having me here, you and Mark, for setting all this up. And if there's anything I can do for the community, any small businesses out there that, educates children or anything, I'm out there to help you guys out. If there's anything I can do, just let me know.
No problem. Thank you. So Worker Power Hour with Randy Corgan, KCAA, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. It was hiding behind the camera and I was reading. Going to break. See you on the other side.
NBC News Radio, I'm Lisa Taylor. The Federal Reserve is leaving interest rates unchanged. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the central bank is aware of the difficulties Americans are facing because of inflation.
My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation.
Rates have been in the same range for the past year as the Fed tries to lower inflation to its goal of 2%. However, investors believe rate cuts are likely to begin in September. President Biden is set to kick off the Democratic National Convention with a primetime speech. Reports say the president's speech will focus on passing the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. Democrats will begin the process of officially nominating the party's candidate for president with a virtual roll call Thursday. Former President Trump is clashing with reporters at the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention in Chicago. Trump took issue with ABC News congressional correspondent Rachel Scott's opening line of questioning.
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. The first question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network.
Scott asked Trump why black voters should trust him following disparaging comments he's made about his political opponents in the past. Trump called the introduction disgraceful and rude. Trump participated in a Q&A today with political journalists about issues facing the black community. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance says criticism is the price of entry to the Republican presidential ticket. He addressed the blowback from his 2021 comments on the societal value of women who don't have children. Harris's campaign has called Vance's political point of view weird, while Trump stands by his running mate. The Ohio Republican says that he has to take the shots.
Located in the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train workers for high-demand, good-paying jobs in various industries throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
Here we are, back on the Worker Power Hour with Randy Corgan. KCAA 1050 AM, 106.5 FM. Are we good? We're live? We're rolling right now, right? I'm looking over at our engineers, making sure that I didn't mess this up. Again, long-time organizer, first-time radio host, so whenever I make mistakes, I'm good. I get to use this excuse. Are we good, guys? We're live? Okay. Sorry, sometimes I don't get the... I'm not 100% sure if I've got this figured out. So, hey, this second part of the hour, I'm going to switch up and do something a little different. versus having an actual guest. And I want to talk about a couple different things that's really important to me. I got to get rid of this. Someone's telling me, oh, yeah, I got this Tic Tac in my mouth. My bad. Apparently, my wife said that my breath stunk or something, and I needed a Tic Tac. And then I forgot I had it in my mouth when I started. See? This is where the first-time radio host comes in. This is where I get to get away with this for a while. With that, there's a few things we want to do coming in the future. What we've done since we've started this radio show since November is we've kind of tested some things. We've tried to do a little bit different lineups, move things around, and figure out what listeners really like the most. And clearly, we want to hear your feedback. And one of the things I'd like to get everybody's feedback on is we'd like to do a contest of some sort. And we have a bunch of ideas on what the contest might be, but I think it'd be better served if we hear from you exactly what kind of contest would be fun for our show and the way our show comes together. And whether it's and you could email us at radioshow@teamsters1932.org and send us a idea of a contest. That's one of the first things I want to cover, because the more we interact with our listeners and our members, the better the show is going to be, the better the content's going to be. And so we really want it to reflect the needs of the show. And hey, I just want to call out Mark and the engineer in there. You guys talking in there are distracting me. I'm a first-time radio host. I'm just letting you know. So what Mark is trying to do is he's trying to learn how to run the board over here. And, for anybody who knows Mark Orr, he's definitely a talker. And see, now he's grabbing the microphone and he's going to try to jump in here and say something.
I'm learning, Randy. I'm trying to learn for you.
I know, but you're distracting me. I'm going to have to get a little blind here and close the blinds. I like to give Mark a little bit of Marky Poo, as we call him in the family. We all, and everybody just laughed here, and I know everybody who's listening that knows what that means just laughed. And now he's looking at me like, oh, I can't believe you just let the secret out. Well, now it's permanent. Everybody's going to know, because now it's live on the air, and it's also going to be on a podcast. So with that, we'd love to hear from you on these contests. Please email us again at radioshow@teamsters1932.org. That way we can come up with a good idea for a contest that connects to the show and encourages listening or encourages interaction. Would love to hear all of your ideas. The next thing I want to just quickly bring up and tell you about is I had a really, really fun interaction with San Bernardino PD a week ago Sunday. And I know Robert, who's sitting here, and Mark, who's sitting here. Mark actually got a front row seat, literally, in the front seat of my car, watching my interaction with San Bernardino PD a week ago Sunday on a picket line. And the reason I bring it up is because, shall I say, I was very aggressive. And for those of you that support law enforcement, I just want you to understand that this is an attack on law enforcement. The Teamsters are the largest union that represents law enforcement in the country. So I'm prefacing that. That doesn't mean that we always have a great relationship with the department. We do have a great relationship with a lot of police departments all over this country. But for some reason, some police departments, it's like they want to run things their own way. And they want to violate workers' rights, and they want to violate people's rights. And shall I say, I gave them an hour and 45-minute education on how the law works when it comes to picket lines, civil rights, workers' rights, Section 7 rights. And those officers couldn't get a word in edgewise. I think I was at a very high volume. I was very aggressive. I was very assertive. And the reason I bring it up is I had a lot of members that were on that picket line that looked at me after, in the breaks of me, I guess, reading them the riot act, saying, where's this Randy been? Who's this guy? When are we going to get this guy on the radio? Now my wife's sitting over there shaking her finger at me saying, you can't have that Randy on the radio. Now, mind you, I never swore at them. I never cussed. I never used any foul language. I never insulted them. What I did is I laid out the law and I laid out the facts, and I explained to them how they were not going to violate workers' rights anymore. They were not going to violate our First Amendment right, and they were not going to violate the civil rights of those individuals that were on that picket line. And we warned them very sternly of what the rules, the laws, and the requirements and regulations were, and basically said, if you do these things, we're going to hold you individually accountable, not just as a department, but individually as officers. And again, I want to say, we're a huge supporter of law enforcement, and we have lots of law enforcement agencies that we represent, including San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, including Ontario PD. I can list, just in my local alone, a ton of law enforcement agencies that we have great relationships with. Unfortunately, we don't have one with San Bernardino, the city of San Bernardino. And hopefully that repairs at some point. But again, the reason I bring it up on the show is there's a lot of people that want to see the more, argumentative side of Randy, the side that maybe you see in bargaining, or you see on a picket line, or you see in a very confrontational setting. Because I'm a very toned down version of Randy on this show, as everybody would say. That's, you got to. As a matter of fact, Randy Kamek said, I barely recognize your voice because it's not like you're at work. You sound totally different than when you're doing your job. As a great example, San Diego PD joined 1699 and UNOC on the strike and was very helpful versus getting a bunch of cars and trying to ram through the picket line and doing something crazy. So again, I bring it up because a bunch of members have actually asked me, and if members have been with me in bargaining, they've seen moments of that flare up. My younger self was very, very animated. I would say much more animated than I am today. My wife is sitting over there again, laughing and kind of. I should get her over here, make her sit down so she can talk. Or I can get Mark here to tell stories about my. No, we can't do that, right? Yeah, that's a totally different show. We got to actually go on to a different show and talk about the youth. Anyway, I want to preface that before I move into discussing the grievance procedure, but. In a nutshell, maybe at some point we'll get up what everybody calls as a fired up Randy, because on that picket line with Amazon, Robert, am I right? Was I a fired up Randy or what? Yeah, Robert was like, "Oh my God, I've never seen anything like that." Like, as a matter of fact, I had two people in the car with me that I've known for decades, and when I was out of the car, they were like, "Okay, I don't get to see that Randy very often." And the reason why is because I don't like to be that far over the top. It just, for me, it was an issue that when you see workers at Amazon that are fighting like they are, and I saw other workers who are police officers that have a retiree medical, that have the ability to retire young, that have a pension, that have great wages and make a good earning, trying to break the spirit of the workers that fought for those workers fought for police officers to even have the right to collectively bargain. And we can actually do a full subject on that later on, and that the private sector went on strike and died for the public sector to have the right to bargain. That is a fact, absolute fact. And it is taken for granted every day, and it should be corrected. And so with that, I'm going to transition into something else, which is a discussion about the grievance procedure. And what does that mean? It's just a term that we use in the union. You hear people say, "Oh, I got this grievance." And I love the fact that a term called grievance, which is really coined by unions, and a grievance procedure is in everyday culture. It's something that people talk about, and most people don't realize that they're using a term that was really, really, expanded under collective bargaining and what that means. And I want to just spend about 10 or 15 minutes. Actually, I don't have 10 or 15. Don't have 15 minutes, but I want to spend some time talking about what a grievance procedure means. And for all of you listening that don't know what that means, many of you have a grievance procedure, but you don't understand the history to it. Many of you may not have a grievance procedure because you're non-union and you're listening, and you may want to know, well, what that means. In very simple terms, what a grievance procedure is if you're union and you have a union contract, is that if I see something that I don't like, I have the right to put a complaint, which we call a grievance, formally on paper and say, I don't agree with this. It could be a policy, it could be a procedure, it could be pay, it could be something that is conflicting with what you believe the contract or the MOU states, and you have a right to be heard on that difference. You could be completely wrong. You still have a right to be heard. And so somebody has to explain to you why your interpretation or understanding of that issue is wrong. And many times you may be wrong, but there's nothing wrong with that because you get to learn what that language and that contract or MOU actually means. So what does a grievance procedure entail? Like, what is it? What's the process? You file a grievance formally in writing. The first thing you do is you notify somebody verbally. If you don't get the response that you think is fair in that verbal notification, you then reduce it to writing formally. No one should be mad that you filed a grievance. There's no one should take offense to it. You're just asking a question. Why is it this way when I believe it's that way? It's really that simple. So the grievance gets presented, and then a supervisor or somebody in an authoritative position has an obligation to respond to what that grievance is, or what that difference is, what that complaint or what that challenge is. And then they have to formally respond and say, well, this is where I think you're wrong or why I think you're right. Obviously, if the individual filing the grievance is correct, then the employer agrees and says, you know what, you're right. Thank you for pointing it out. We'll rectify it, whether it's a pay issue or a policy change or an interpretation of something. All those very things, will be squared away in that first meeting. Well, let's say the first or the second meeting, the two parties, I call them parties, the union and the employer, don't agree. Where does it go from there? Well, you adjudicate it to a higher level. And so you take it to somebody superior. So if it's a supervisor, you take it to their boss. And then if they still disagree, then you have a formal sit down before you go to what you call an arbitration, or a third party neutral who's going to decide, or mediator of some sort, and say, well, I think that the union is correct, or I think that the employer is correct. Again, no one should be offended by the filing of grievances. Employers shouldn't be upset. It's literally a clarification to understand, so that I, as the individual filing the grievance, should understand the interpretation of the subject. And so there are various types of grievance procedures. And those various types of grievance procedures, what I mean by that is they have longer steps. And what I mean by steps is maybe the first step is with a shop steward and a supervisor. And then the second step is it's elevated, and then the next person is the supervisor's boss, a manager. And then it goes to a plant or a facility manager or a director. There's all kinds of iterations from that point on, depending on the operation, depending on the employer, and depending on what the parties have agreed to. So you'll have various steps. Sometimes it's 2 steps, sometimes it's 4 or 5 steps. Again, depends on the type of organization it could be too. And so the reason why it's so important to talk about the grievance procedure is the reality is only 10% of America is protected by a grievance procedure at work. That is a shocking number. Only 10% of America is protected by a grievance procedure. And so a lot of people think, well, I got all these protections at work. No, you don't. If you are not union, you do not have a grievance procedure. Your employer may have some protest process. At the end of the day, they make the decision whether or not they agree with you or not, and there's no place for you to adjudicate it. You say, oh, well, I can sue you. Yeah, good luck. Stand in line with a whole bunch of other people that are trying to sue their employer frivolously over issues that are employment. And I mean that by straight up saying most issues, the court looks at it as frivolous when it comes to that, because the court would be backed up with a ton of small issues if that's how it's handled. And so typically it doesn't get adjudicated that way for non-union workers. For union workers, if you have a grievance procedure and you're going to go to arbitration, it's an automatic process that is actually spelled out in your contract, spelled out in your MOU. And so let's get the history of a grievance procedure. This is part of the subject that most people don't know. And the history of what a grievance procedure is in the early 1900s, in let's say 1920, 1915, 1910, 1930, before about 1935, the way grievances were resolved is the workers at a particular facility, as crazy as this is going to sound when I say this, if the employer didn't agree with the grievance, their remedy was to go on strike. So in other words, they had a 3-year contract, and let's say a month into the contract, they had a dispute over an issue, and somebody filed a grievance, and the employer didn't agree with the grievance. Then what happened is the employer is supposed to, the employer would say, well, I don't agree. I'm not going to make the change. Then the union would have to say, okay, well, we don't agree with you. We're going to walk off the job, and we're not going to work until you resolve the grievance. That is what the grievance procedure was prior to about 1935 to 40. The grievance procedure started to move into a process because if you went on strike, let's say it was over a back pay issue, something minor, and everybody decided to walk off the job. Obviously, there's some things that we probably shouldn't be walking off the job for. However, the court system started to get backed up with these types of cases. And so the employer would go to court, the union would go to court, we'd have the strike going on. Obviously, this is going back 100 years. And the court system started to get filled up with these disputes. So what everybody decided to do was come up with grievance procedures that would then be implemented into the contract so that labor management would be able to create a system that would resolve them and prevent them from going on strike over every single issue. And so the question that came in, it says, what happens if a member fears retaliation for filing a grievance? Well, first of all, you need to talk to your union and you need to recognize you should not feel any, if you feel retaliated against because you filed a grievance, there's a bigger problem now in your work area because you should not feel that way. And if you feel that way, you need to sit down with the employer and say, I'm being straight up. We feel as if we're going to be retaliated against. That is actually against the law. We have a right to strike an employer over that issue. That's what they call an unfair labor practice. So seeing that question come in, I know I switched gears here, but I'll get back to the point. The fact that the court system, I only got 3 minutes, 3.5. Oh my, yeesh, this is going fast. I still got a couple points I got to hit. So the grievance procedure originally was resolved through a labor dispute. So long story short, that's been put into the contract to have steps to adjudicate and get to a neutral party to decide who is right and who is wrong. Why is it necessary to have this process, and why is it necessary to make sure this process is utilized? First of all, I think sometimes it gets overutilized and sometimes it gets underutilized. The most important aspect about a grievance procedure that needs to be recognized is what worker power means when it comes to the grievance procedure. I have been doing this job over 30 years, and areas that I have worker power where workers have a tremendous amount of strength and solidarity, I don't get a lot of grievances. The reason I don't get a lot of grievances is because issues get resolved, number one. Number two, I don't need to depend on a piece of paper and a contract for the employer to recognize the power of the workforce. And worker power will override everything. And I have seen very, very strong examples in my time where workers have exercised their power in a space, and the employer says, well, we got a grievance procedure. And I look at them and say, I don't know what to tell you, but that grievance procedure tells us it's going to take about 6 months to resolve this. This group is fired up enough on the issue. You got about 6 minutes, not 6 months. And if you don't believe me, this is what the workers are willing to do. And most of the time what happens is that employer caves in and we're able to come to a reasonable conclusion. It is the union's responsibility in those instances where there's that much power to be reasonable. It is our responsibility. If we overstretch and overreach our power, we're going to abuse it and we're going to lose it. And so what do I got, 60 seconds? Okay. So hopefully I did a good job of just giving some basics on grievance procedure. I don't know if anybody has texted me while I'm on here. No, they did not. So I actually told my staff if anything came up while I was talking about grievance procedure, throw it at me. Apparently somebody did through that question I asked earlier. But really this all focuses around worker power. And what we're doing in the Inland Empire around worker power and talking about the grievance procedure, talking about workers organizing, the reason why we got billboards and we got the Teamster Advantage Network and we have the radio show and we have the buses with our branding on it, and we're openly talking about worker power like we are, is we want more and more workers to understand the collective power that they have so that they can get a fair share, so that when somebody goes to work in a job, they can afford to buy a home, so they can afford to buy a nice car, so they can live in a nice neighborhood and have the means to take care of their working class family. And how do we build worker power? The way we build worker power is we talk with our family, we talk with our friends, we talk with our neighbors, and we make sure that we understand each other's fights and we're willing to work together and we're willing to help one another in this space by continuing to support each other's, let's say, grievance or issue. With 90% of the workforce not having a union, this is exactly why corporate America has been able to kind of gut what a worker gets, what the average worker gets in this system today. And so this is KCAA 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. This is the Worker Power Hour with Randy Corrigan, longtime organizer, first-time radio host, signing off.